Every week, we share our offertory with a community organization that reflects our values and commitment to service. This month, we are sharing our plate with Meadville Lombard Theological School. As a Unitarian Universalist institution, Meadville Lombard is an intentionally pluralist learning community committed to furthering the transformative, justice-making potential of liberal religion. You can donate through the plate that will be coming around, or through the QR code on the screen and in your order of service. We practice generosity, knowing our gifts create ripples of love and care in our community. Let us be a generous people. Please join me in dedicating this offering to the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action. We dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you.
I invite the children to come forward for the children's story. We've got enough time, because some of them are coming down from the balcony, that grown-ups could come forward too. This is a story for all ages, and some of the illustrations are pretty funny. Perfect, thanks. I'm lucky I've got good knees for now. So our story this morning... Oh, sorry, there's a couple more people. Good morning. So our story this morning is called After the Fall, and it is by Dan Santat, and it has puppets. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot, high up on the wall. It's a bit of a weird spot for an egg to be when you think about it, but I loved being up in the sky with the birds. Then one day, I fell. I'm sort of famous for that part. Folks called it the Great Fall, which sounds a little grand. It was just an accident. But it changed my life. All the king's horses and all the king's men did manage to patch me up again. Well, most of me. After that day, I became afraid of heights. Can someone explain for the people at the back really loud, where is he sleeping? On the floor, not on his bunk bed with his pretty pictures of the birds. After that day, I became afraid of heights. It kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. Can someone who shout out a couple of the names of the cereals that are up on top? Crunch Tiger, Rainbow Bites, Sugar Bunny, Fruit Pops. Can someone else read some of the easy-to-reach ones on the bottom? Fiber Flakes, Flax. I'm hearing bland. Wheat Biscuits, grown-up food, no fun. Rice Crackles, thank you. I would walk past that wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I missed being up in the sky with the birds, but I would never do it because I knew accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It was not the same, but it was close enough. And then one day, an idea flew by. Making paper planes. Thank you. You want to show them? Paper plane. Making paper planes was harder than I thought. It's okay if I grab that now for a minute? We're going to need it later. Thanks. Making paper planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches, but day after day I kept trying and trying until I got it just right. My plane was perfect. It flew like nothing could stop it. It wasn't the same as being high in the air with the birds, but it was close enough. Unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. And I almost walked away again. But then I thought about working on my paper plane and all of the things I missed, and I decided I was going to climb that wall. The higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it, but I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. And maybe now you won't think of me as that egg who is famous for falling. Hopefully now you'll remember me as the egg who got back up.
I love that paper plane.
Good. I love it too. Do you love the bird? The egg who got back up and discovered
I love the bird.
Me too. And he discovered he could fly. And that is the end of the story. Fly, 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 fly. Thank you guys so much. Do you-
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Moses Gaither Ganem, and I've been a member at Eliot here for about a year now. I was actually a preschooler across the hall at the adjacent nursery school, and up until the age of 8 or so, I came to Eliot services along with my mom and participated in RE programs. I started coming to Eliot again as an adult when close friends of mine, Heather Tisdall and Linda Sen, expressed an interest in attending services. Walking back into the halls of Eliot felt like returning home, a familiar place filled with loving people. As I continued to attend services over the last few years, I developed many meaningful connections and found myself growing ever more involved. When I asked myself, what has me so willing to invest my time and energy in this community? The answer came back as love. I love this Eliot community. What do I love about this Eliot community? This is a community of open hearts. It is a community committed to keeping love at the center. This is a community of people committed to letting love transform us and move us into action. The more I engage with the Eliot community, the more my cup gets filled. As a member, and in an act of reflecting my commitment to this community, I have made a monthly pledge. And if love moves you to do so, know that it makes a big difference in strengthening the work of this important community. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. A prayer for healing. Comfort us in our complicated grief, O movement that strives for a loving way. Remind us that our shared humanity and that we are all united with all other living beings on this precious planet, on the edge of a galaxy, among millions of galaxies. Empower us to love our neighbors and those who curse us. Open our hearts to the healing we need. Open our country's hearts to the healing we need. Open our enemies' hearts to the healing they need. May we be more than our worst thoughts. May we be the radical love we proclaim we are. May we know that love can heal us, all of us, if we act with compassion, if we offer grace. Let us enter into a time of silence for the prayers and meditations of our hearts. Let us speak the names of those we would hold in care. O movement towards love, work through us for a world where the least is not kept down so that others may trample on them, where violence is not celebrated and perpetuated through hatred and division. Please, dear God of many names, hear this prayer. Work in our hearts, be on our lips, and in our actions. May we be in your loving movement always. Amen. Please remain seated for our meditative hymn, number 123, The Spirit of Life.
Okay.
Opening by the Soul Matters team. It is easy to get tricked, taken for a ride, convinced that joy is a possession, something to be opened just by us, as if it's a holiday special delivery waiting for us to unwrap it and keep it forever. And who can blame us? With pain being so prevalent, sadness seems to stay. Why can't joy? But maybe it's elusive for a reason. Maybe it's slippery in order to help us understand that it was, or better yet, to be flung, to be passed, not possessed, to be spread between you and me, between the ones who receive its gift and the ones that have been looking for its treasure for a very long time. Maybe joy is a beautiful and elegant contagion, a power over which we have more control than we think, if only we share it. If only we notice that joy is not ours to keep, but ours to give. Maybe joy opens us as much as we open to it. Maybe that's the way light leaks into our world.
was lovely. Just as I was beginning seminary, my congregation moved into a new building. I was on the board at the time, and I was a general busybody with my nose and everything, so I was involved somehow in renovating the space to make it suitable for Unitarian Universalists. First and foremost, that meant removing the giant wooden cross from the front of the room. So if you're new, I need to clarify, UUs don't have a problem with crosses. We're not vampires. There's lots of people who are both UUs and Christians, but there's also humanists and agnostics and Buddhists and pagans, just to name a few. So a giant cross at the front of the room would have been lifting up just one perspective, a bit more Jesus than our congregation was looking for on a weekly basis. So the theology was clear, but it turns out in practical terms, wood is quite heavy. That phrase, cross to bear, is not just a metaphor. Even getting this thing off the wall was a feat of engineering and a near-death experience, and now what? This giant cross wasn't just going to fit in the back of my minivan to be hauled away. It would have to be cut into pieces. And you can't use the power saw in the sanctuary because sawdust flies everywhere, and there's an informal rule about no more power saws in the sanctuary, Liz. So this was the line of thinking that led me to a conversation with my friend Anne, who is a woman of great maturity and perspective. This is a sensitive time for your neighbors, Anne explained. With the loss of the old church that shrank down until they couldn't afford their building, your new neighbors will be grieving. But there's also potential for new connection, for inviting people in. And Liz, the community's introduction to Unitarian Universalism cannot be you taking a power saw to a cross on the front lawn of the church. So I'm not sure how the cross was removed in the end. For some reason, they didn't involve me any further, but it got done. But here's the thing. It had hung there for many years, beside the huge vaulted window through which light streamed down. And it's true what they say. Light really does transform everything it touches, particularly on a timescale of years. And so sure enough, the paint around the cross had grown distinctly lighter, but the paint behind the cross had not. And so now, immediately beside the pulpit, was a clear, stenciled outline. Now, we could have solved this by repainting, of course. But in order to do that, we would have had to agree on paint colors. And the decorating committee pointed out that the colors couldn't be chosen until the fabric for the chairs that would replace the pews had been chosen. And the worship committee felt we couldn't remove the pews until we talked about how we embody our identity in the structure of our worship space, particularly when it comes to religious authority. And so for many months, we did not worship beside a giant cross. Instead, we worshiped beside the very conspicuous shadow cast by its absence. A giant metaphorical Jesus was here symbol stenciled above our heads. It was there in more ways than one. It was on the literal wall, of course, but it's also in the role that the Protestant tradition we come from plays in everything we do. It's in the tunes of the songs we sing, the fact that we meet on a Sunday morning, often in a building owned just for that purpose. We've expanded our theology, but the ways that we embody that theology haven't changed much in centuries. To me, the shadow of the cross on the wall on Sunday mornings was a physical manifestation of a structure that was frozen in time. It said, we've decided to do things differently, but we're not quite doing that yet because the details are still stuck in committee. So around the time of this shadow of the cross business, I was feeling stuck in committee myself. I was so in love with the ideas and the values of Unitarian Universalism, and I was expressing that love by going to seminary, where we talked about this shadow of the cross stuff. We wouldn't have used that language exactly, but we talked about how social change was threatening traditional institutions like legacy media, academia, and church, and how we might expand our structures to adapt. But we had those conversations in a seminary, mirroring the old ways of doing things with every detail of our structure. The people leading us were ministers and professors, trained and experienced with the old paradigms and not the new ones, which made it very hard to think outside the box. The details kept getting stuck in committee. And I sucked at all of this. Even when I am not critiquing the premise of school, I am a terrible student. Forcing my brain to study has always felt like trying to wrestle an active toddler into a car seat. I had long since received an ADHD diagnosis, which is the medical term for the active toddler car seat situation. And I had received medication and behavioral suggestions and all the messages that go with all of that. And at the time, I saw myself as disordered and the wrong shape for academia. But I loved Unitarian Universalism, and I wanted to serve it, and this was how you did it. So I was determined to squeeze into the shape that was being asked of me. I mean, sometimes. On my better behaved days, I was determined. On my less disciplined days, I would skip the books we were supposed to be reading and do what I love to do, which is laugh. And I remember one day I'm procrastinating on my homework, watching all these comedians on YouTube, and I think, wait a second. They're talking about the exact same ideas as the people in the books I'm reading. Big topics, often tricky ones. Stand-up comedians tackle everything: religion, money, race, ethics. But they do it in a way that's funny and easy to pay attention to. And this was the beginning of a doorway in me. Maybe the fact that I had trouble paying attention to academics wasn't just the flaw that would make me a crappy minister, although I do believe I would have been a crappy minister had I continued. Maybe those same traits are what would allow me to create conversations and communities in new ways that were more accessible to a broader spectrum of people. The farther I moved from the powerless position of a grade school child, the more assertive that line of thinking became. I would sit in my school lectures, and the usual messages would run through my mind. The problem is, I need to be better at paying attention. But now there was this little voice that argued back, that argued, how come it's always that I have to work harder to pay attention? I have been working as hard as I can for years. How come my professors never have to work any harder at being a little bit easier to pay attention to, huh? When it was dry, the stuff I was learning was also, it was not what I had expected. I had always had these stories in my mind, like Michael Servetus, the Unitarian martyr, chased, persecuted, ultimately burned at the stake for his brave act of speaking the truth to John Calvin. Turns out, if you read Servetus' writings in his own words, he is smart and articulate, he's very brave, he's also obnoxious. He doesn't just tell his truth, he stalks John Calvin, writes him letters arguing about every little thing Calvin says. He distributes books. At one point, Calvin has a warrant out for Servetus' arrest, and Servetus goes to one of Calvin's talks, sits in the front, and stares him down. He's always there, like the worst kind of internet troll, but in real life. Servetus didn't deserve what happened to him, of course. Nobody deserves that. But after reading his actual words, like dripping with arrogance and condescension, there was like this piece of me that sympathized with John Calvin. Like, Servetus, I know that guy. I have chaired meetings containing that guy. Sometimes I am that guy in the meeting. He is the best of us in some ways and the worst of us in others. Or Emerson and Thoreau, that's another one. I had always admired the transcendentalists, how they forged these intentional, beautiful lives filled with integrity. Learning a bit more about it, Thoreau could retreat to the woods to suck the marrow out of life because he was living on land Emerson was letting him use for free. Where'd that land come from? And the story about how Thoreau is making this bold choice to live a simple life in the woods, I think we could say Thoreau didn't invent that way of living. Before Thoreau's people arrived, simple was the only way anybody ever lived in those woods. There was this whole system supporting him. Thoreau had no kids to take care of. He had his free land. We're pretty sure Emerson's wife was doing his laundry. Louisa May Alcott, meanwhile, is living a few miles away, making all the same theological points about simplicity and virtue in what became her best-selling novel, Little Women, but she wrote in a way that was funny and accessible. While her dad sat in the study talking philosophy with Thoreau and Emerson, he did not work for much of Louisa's life. Louisa got to work writing. In a world not built for women to have a voice, she found a way to have one. In a world not built for women to earn, she found a way to feed her family with that voice. And she did all that while she was doing her own laundry. I wasn't the only one who was thinking along these lines. We lovers of laughter found each other, and we bonded, and we used our newfound knowledge to play very historically specific pranks on one another. So one time, some of our friends who ran a UU housing cooperative in Boston posted online that they were accepting applications for new housemates. A few of us applied as various famous Unitarians and Universalists. We applied as Emerson, listing Thoreau under pets. We applied as Michael Servetus, and under food allergies, we wrote barbecue. I'm not endorsing it, I'm just telling you what happened. We applied as the people we thought were missing from our mainstream history, too. Reverend Olympia Brown, the first woman in the US to be ordained. Dorothy Dix, whose lobbying transformed conditions for institutionalized people in the US, Canada, and several other countries. These women are not our best-known heroes, but when you line their lives up against Thoreau in the Woods or Servetus with his letters, their stories deserve just as much acknowledgement. So the Housing Co-op wrote back, and they invited us for an interview, which was going to be tricky because all of us were dead. The Housing Co-op also cautioned us in their letter that some housemates may not have experience in living with the dead and may require education on matters of corporeal privilege. All of this was followed by a week of messaging and coordinating and giggling and pranking that left me feeling warm and connected. I felt connected with my peers and with my UU heritage. We were gently poking fun at things we thought should be knocked down a peg or two, and lifting up stories that weren't always told. And I felt connected with my values. We kept coordinating to make sure it was joyful for everybody and never got mean. Above all, the prank left me feeling a part of Unitarian Universalism. We understood the shared jokes because they come out of a shared culture. I mean, corporeal privilege? How UU is that? This was a space that had room for me, where I didn't have to change shape to fit into a prescribed shadow. And I didn't want it to end. So on a whim, I created a Facebook group, and I named it the UU Hysterical Society. This was a play on the UU Historical Society, who have changed their name like twice since then, so nobody ever gets my joke. People usually just point out that the word hysterical has a troublesome history, used as a weapon to discredit and sometimes harm women. And they're right. Throughout history, symptoms of hysteria have been varied. Sometimes it was a woman who was struggling with what we would now call a mental illness or a disability. Sometimes it was a physical condition like epilepsy, or a life choice like choosing not to get married. Hysteria was a catch-all word for any woman who was being inconvenient and needed to be treated. A hysterical woman is a woman who is the wrong shape. And I, who was struggling so hard to fit into the shape of the shadow of that cross, I loved my UU Hysterical Society. It was an expression of my values. It was a space that fit me. It was a break from the ministerial formation process at a time when that process was starting to break me. And for years, I didn't think of it as anything other than my own personal refuge. By the time I figured out something else was going on, we had about 20,000 members, and someone posted that she drove her car off the road after spotting a UU church. She said she thought we were a joke religion made up for the purposes of the UU Hysterical Society. And she said that seeing a real UU church was like spotting a unicorn. She said she almost drove her car off the road yelling, "They're real, they're real." And I thought, wow, we could be telling 20,000 people about what Unitarian Universalism is. And then I thought, crap, I'm not the right person to represent UUism on that kind of scale. Like, I didn't finish any of the assigned readings. So fortunately, I didn't have to be the right person for the job, at least not on my own. A religious educator named Kathy Smith joined the team at that time, and she was able to fill in some of my gaps. And together, we stewarded the group as it continued to grow, and I toyed with the idea that maybe it should become something more, like maybe a legal entity that could apply for grants to fund all this extra work Kathy was putting in. But even thinking along those lines felt presumptive, like who did I think we were? This is not a rhetorical question. I did not know who I thought we were or what we were doing. And then, in November of 2019, something happened that changed my perspective forever. My friend, Reverend Mbutsa Ndadijimana, approached me for help raising money to settle a group of refugees. In November of 2019, the Hysterical Society held its first charity fundraiser, which was holiday-themed. We sold funny PDFs, like labels for your wine that said, "Hey, this was water a minute ago." We sold tags for gifts that said, "It's the thought that counts, and I way overthought this." We sold flasks that said, "For when thoughts and prayers are not enough," which was very popular. And on one of my trips to the post office, arms full of flasks, the post office guy says, "Okay, I'll bite. what is a hysterical society? And I didn't respond how I usually do when I am asked what I do for a living. Normally, I would mumble, I run a Facebook group that makes fun of my religion. This is not an accurate answer, but it does usually end the conversation. Instead, I lifted my head up, and I answered with confidence. I grinned and said we were a group that was about joy and community and refugees. We had started gathering around laughter, which is a good in and of itself. It is like a soup kitchen for the soul. But we were slowly turning into more than that. We were still about laughter and community and also about bringing dignity to people who deserved a chance to build a new life. The Canadian not-for-profit Mirth and Dignity was incorporated the following month, Inherent Mirth and Dignity. To this day, 100% of the profits from our merchandise goes to the charity that Mabutsa founded. But most of what we do is actually support for forms of UUism that are not supported by traditional institutions. We started with the UU Hysterical Society, then we partnered with a board game ministry, and then a comedy podcast, most recently online soulful singing. I could go on about these projects, but this is not an infomercial. You don't need this much information, unless you share our vision of UUism beyond traditional structures, in which case, come talk to me about becoming one of the people who supports us with a $5 a month pledge. Okay, now I'm done. Okay, for now, what I really want to draw your attention to is the overarching arc of the story, that feeling of not quite fitting in, which I find is a feeling that a lot of UUs can empathize with. Many of us became UU because we didn't fit into the communities that we were born into. We've figured out how to be diverse theologically, and I believe we are also right now in the process of creating a structural diversity, a bunch of different ways to be UUs or interface with Unitarian Universalism. We have together inherited a shadow of a cross, a set of institutions and practices that define real religion that don't always work for modern communities. I've heard from people who feel like they're tired, they're trying to do too much, things are too expensive, they feel focused on the wrong things. In our churches and in larger society, the way we've always done things isn't doing the trick anymore. What if we're not cracking because we're breaking, but because we're turning into something different? What if we leaned into changing shape, into a version of Unitarian Universalism that contains churches and also other types of communities in a symbiotic relationship? I don't know exactly where that would lead, any more than I knew where the prank in 2015 was going to lead. But I do know that the first step right now is to give ourselves permission to be who we are, not who we think we're supposed to be, or who we've always been. What would we do differently if we saw ourselves as hatching? As the Leonard Cohen lyric tells us so beautifully, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There are cracks in everything. That's how the light gets in. Which I think is true, but it's also not the whole picture. The cracks are how the light gets in, yes. Sometimes, though, the cracks are also where the light gets out. The cracks are where the hatching starts.
All right, please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 1017, Building a New Way, and remain standing as we close out the service. Let us extinguish our chalice and share our benediction. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, may the Spirit of life hold you, may love bless you, and may joy find a place in your days. Love to you all. Go in peace.